Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Thursday, February 21st. I have kind of a tight time constraint tonight. Dow Jones finished down 47 points to 13,880. It's being taped at 4:01, by the way. S&P 500 lost 0.6% to 1502, and NASDAQ finished down 1%, 3131. Gold 1575. Oil $93, down another $2. And the 10-year Treasury saw its yield fall to 1.98%. European stocks cratered. London down 1.6%, Frankfurt down 1.9%, and Paris down 2.3%. In Euroland, a composite index of the Euro area services and manufacturing contracted in February according to a flash report by Markit, M-A-R-K-I-T. Final reading is March 3rd, but the flash showed that the Euro 17 fell to 47.3 from 48.6 in January, 50 being the dividing line between growth and contraction. Specifically, the services PMI fell to 47.3 from 48.6 as well. Manufacturing PMI index slipped to 47.8 from 47.9. Germany saw its services measure fall to 54.1 from 55.7 in January. Its manufacturing rose to 50.1. Its overall composite was thus 52.7, down from 54.4 in January, but the big story was in France, which saw its services PMI fall to 42.7 from 43.6. Manufacturing was up a bit to 43.6 from 42.9. But all in all, focus on the composite services and manufacturing for the Euro 17 down. Flash report February to 47.3, so the sickness continues. Next Monday I'll be talking about the Italian election, February 24th and 25th, and whether or not there's a potential return of contagion, because there is no doubt it's going to be a chaotic result. Turning to the Federal Reserve, I just want to reiterate some of the items from yesterday concerning the release of the Federal Reserve's Open Market Committee minutes from its January meeting. There was a feeling among some FOMC members that QE3, quantitative easing, and the Fed's bond buying asset purchase program should end sooner than first announced, which was essentially when the unemployment rate fell to 6.5%, or if inflation went crazy. The Fed's balance sheet is now over $3 trillion, on its way to $4 trillion by year end. And so how, when that inevitable day arises, do you begin to wind it all down? Anyway, according to the minutes, a number of participants stated that an ongoing evaluation of the efficacy, cost, and risk of asset purchases might well lead the committee to taper or end its purchases before it judged that a substantial improvement in the outlook for the labor market had occurred. Others believe stopping the program too soon could damage the economy. Now, on the sequestration issue, next Friday, March 1st, most economists and strategists would agree that should the White House and Republicans reach a deal that addresses our deficit situation in a meaningful fashion, it would be a positive, even with the cuts that will cost jobs in the short term, a grand bargain on the lines of the latest Simpson-Bowles plan would be tremendous for the U.S. and the financial markets, but there won't be a grand bargain. We all know that. Ain't gonna happen. What will happen in the next 8 days? Republicans are ready to let the sequester hit $85 billion in budget cuts the rest of this year, half coming from defense, as part of $1.2 trillion in cuts over the next 10 years. The reason being, at least this would be real cuts and a true step in taming the deficit. But the Pentagon is none too pleased, faced with $500 billion in cuts the next decade, including about 10% of the annual Pentagon budget in the next year. General James Amos, U.S. Marine Corps Commandant, has warned Congress sequestration will leave ships in ports, aircraft grounded for want of necessary maintenance and flying hours, units only partially trained and reset after 12 years of continuous combat, and modernization programs canceled. Steps already taken in anticipation of the March 1 deadline include the postponement of an aircraft carrier's deployment to the Gulf, a pay rise of only 1% for all service personnel, and a notice to the Pentagon's 800,000 civilian employees of likely layoffs and or unpaid leave, such as perhaps a cut in pay over the next 6 months. General Ray Odierno, U.S. Army Chief of Staff, has warned that troops in Afghanistan might not be able to return home as scheduled because their replacement units will not be trained and ready to deploy. Odierno said, "Our country's inability to put its fiscal house in order compromises the future of the Army and ultimately will impact our ability to provide security to our nation." He said the U.S. Army was facing a funding shortfall of $11.4 billion, which would delay the purchase of tanks, helicopters, and infantry fighting vehicles needed to replace the ones that have been in constant use in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past decade. That equipment won't be ready for deployment if the Army is called upon to fight again, said Odierno. House Speaker John Boehner issued a statement. As the Commander-in-Chief, President Obama is ultimately responsible for our military readiness, so it's fair to ask, what is he doing to stop his sequester that would hollow out our armed forces? Obama, on the other hand, continued his efforts to pressure GOP lawmakers to embrace his proposed fix for the sequester, sitting for 8 interviews with hand-picked television stations in states that would be hit hard by reductions. He told Boston's WCVB, an ABC affiliate, "There's a better way to do it than this, but the key is for Republicans to go ahead to put forward a balanced, responsible approach that will avoid cuts to things like Head Start programs, medical programs, help for the mentally ill, all these things that have an impact on people's day-to-day lives." That was from the Washington Post, and some of the previous comments were from the London Times. Turning to China and its undeclared cyber war on the United States, Representative Mike Rogers, Republican of Michigan, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, said the Chinese government's direct role in cyber theft is rampant and the problems have grown exponentially. It is crucial that the administration begin bilateral discussions to ensure that Beijing understands that there are consequences for state-sponsored economic espionage. Top administration officials painted a pervasive portrait of the far-reaching cost of espionage, competitive disadvantages, job losses, product impacts that American firms, as well known as General Motors, have already had to confront. Attorney General Eric Holder said at a White House conference yesterday there are only two categories of companies affected by trade secret theft: those that know they've been compromised and those that don't know it yet. A hacker in China can acquire source code from a software company in Virginia without leaving his or her desk. The White House on Wednesday didn't specify actions it would take against China, but the strategy document is peppered with examples of Chinese theft of corporate secrets from top American firms, and officials said the administration has repeatedly raised the theft issue at senior levels of the Chinese government. The Obama administration is casting trade secret theft as a major threat to both economic and national security. Victoria Espinel, U.S. Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator, said, "The theft of trade secrets impacts national security, undermines our global competitiveness, diminishes U.S. export prospects, and puts American jobs at risk." Maurice Taylor of tire maker Titan International is in the news in a big way. He wrote a no-holds-barred letter to the French Industrial Renewal Minister, Arnaud Montebourg, explaining why his firm would never buy part of an ailing Goodyear factory in Amiens. Taylor wrote, "I have visited the factory a couple of times. The French workforce gets paid high wages but only work for 3 hours. They get 1 hour for breaks and lunch, talk for 3, and work for 3. I told this to the French union workers to their faces. They told me that's the French way. How stupid do you think we are? Titan is the one with the money and the talent to produce tires. What does the crazy union have? It has the French government." Well, in a written reply, Mr. Montebourg told Mr. Taylor, quote, "Your words, as extremist as they are insulting, show a perfect ignorance of our country. Can I remind you that Titan, the company you had, is 20 times smaller than Michelin, the French technology leader with a global reach, and 35 times more profitable. That shows the extent that Titan could have learnt and gained enormously from a French base." French government spokeswoman Najat Vallaud-Belkacem also weighed in, saying, quote, "I would like to remind Mr. Taylor that France remains the #1 European destination for American investors, and it's likely there are very good reasons for that. France does have a 35-hour statutory work week brought in by the socialists in 2000, but critics say it is stifling growth. In Damascus, a massive car bomb exploded near Syria's ruling party headquarters, actually at a checkpoint between the party headquarters and the Russian embassy. This happened today, killed at least 53, and then also in Damascus 2 other bombs went off, killing an additional 13. The rebels haven't been able to advance into the city center, but now they're using guerrilla tactics. And they might be working. Well, just a couple items. Black History Month. This day in baseball, 1966, the AL, American League, announces the hiring of Emmett Ashford, the first African-American umpire in Major League Baseball history. I remember Mr. Ashford. Remember him being a very good umpire. And finally, just a note that I found interesting. Believe it or not, I subscribe to the Sierra Club magazine. It has some good ideas for outdoor trips. But this is a great story on wind farms and mountain climbers trading granite walls for giant turbines. Mountaineers cash in on their rope skills to keep America's wind farms humming. If you're looking for a job and you love to mountain climb, employment has increased to something like 4,000, and these are good paying jobs, and you still have your weekends free, I imagine, to climb mountains. I just thought it was a terrific idea. That's all for tonight. I'll be back with you on Monday. Read my week in review, posted early Saturday. Keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers, and for more stuff, go to stocksandnews.com. Take care.